Hi everyone. Today we're going to be looking at how to solve equations that involve absolute value. So in your notebook, please put today's subtitle, Absolute Value Equations. When solving absolute value equations, there's a few scenarios that you need to be able to recognize to make your job a lot easier. Let's take a look at what can happen during the course of solving an absolute value equation. So let's start off by putting this in your notebook. Suppose you have an absolute value equation solving for x, where you end up with absolute value of x equals a result, k. Now a couple of things can happen depending on what k is. So I'd like you to put number 1. Well, the first thing that can happen is, what if the equation you're solving involves a positive result? So if k was bigger than 0, then what can happen in this case is that the value of x can potentially have two solutions. X could equal to either negative k or positive k. Let's take a look at a quick example so you'll see that this actually makes very logical sense. Put example, please. Now suppose I give you a very simple equation. The absolute value of x is equal to 7. It falls into this category because notice the result, 7 is positive, bigger than 0. So what could be the value of x? Well, think about it. Whatever is inside the absolute value expression has to give you 7. So the absolute value of what could give you 7? Well, for sure, 7, because the absolute value of 7 is 7. But don't forget that it could also be negative 7, because the absolute value of negative 7 is also 7. So the value of x could be minus 7 or 7. And therefore, the solution would be minus 7 or positive 7. The second scenario that I'd like you to recognize is, what if your absolute value equation was actually equal to exactly 0? So ask yourselves, the absolute value of something has to equal to 0. What could that something be? Good for you if you realize that x has no choice but to be equal to 0. So in this particular scenario, there's only one solution. Here's a quick example of this in action. So, suppose I give you this very simple equation. The absolute value of x equals 0. So what's the only thing that x could be? Well, it has to be 0, because the absolute value of 0 is 0. There's no other choice. So therefore, your solution is simply 0. And now finally, for the third scenario, what if this happened? What if the absolute value of x was equal to a negative number, so something smaller than 0? So, think hard about this. And don't forget about what the definition of an absolute value means. So, if the absolute value of x is equal to a negative number, what could x be? Good for you if you realize that. The definition of absolute value says that you must always end up with a positive result. So therefore, for an absolute value equation to give you a negative result would be impossible. Therefore, x has no solution. Here's a quick example to demonstrate this. Suppose I ask you to solve this very simple equation. The absolute value of x is equal to -7. So what does x have to be? Well, x cannot be anything that would actually make this expression work. Why? Well, because the absolute value of anything has to give you a positive result. And in this case, it equals to -7. And these are the three scenarios that could happen during the course of solving an absolute value equation. Now, let's solve some real equations. So put example, please. Suppose I ask you to solve x in the following absolute value equation. Absolute value of x plus 2 equals to 3. So what does x have to be? Well, think carefully about it. The x plus 2, what can that be so that the absolute value of all of that gives you a positive 3? Well, in order to get an answer of positive 3, perhaps that inside the absolute value expression, it could equal to 3, because absolute value of 3 is equal to 3, or the expression could also equal to -3, because don't forget, the absolute value of -3 also equals to 3. So this is -3 or 3. Now at this stage, when you figure that out, you can actually ignore the absolute value expression itself and just focus on what's inside it, the x plus 2. So we know that the x plus 2 could equal to -3, or we know that the x plus 2 could equal to 3. And now you solve each one. So on the left expression, we have that x could equal to -5. And on the right one, we have that x could equal to 1. So therefore, our solution is -5 and 1. Now let's perform a little self-check to see if our two solutions are correct. So let's put down self-check. Alright, let's check to see if -5 works. Alright, so let's plug it back into the original expression. The absolute value of -5 plus 2, does it equal to 3? Well, let's check. When you simplify it, it gives you the value of -3. Does that equal to 3? And sure enough, it does. The absolute value of -3 is positive 3, and that does equal to 3. Now, let's make sure that it also works for our second solution, x equals 1. So 4, x equals 1. So let's check. Absolute value of 1 plus 2, does that equal to 3? Let's simplify it. That gives you the absolute value of 3. Does that equal to 3? And of course it does. So as you can see, it's not very difficult to solve an absolute value equation, and it's certainly not difficult to check if you were correct. Now, I'd like for you to try an example on your own. We'd like you to solve x in the following absolute value equation. The absolute value of 2x minus 4 equals to 10. What does the value of x has to be? So, think about it for a moment. What does 2x minus 4 have to be so that the absolute value of all that gives you 10? I'd like you to pause the video and try it now. Alright, let's see how you guys did. So if you thought about it correctly, you should have realized that the 2x minus 4 has to either equal to minus 10 or positive 10. Why? Because if the whole expression was equal to 10, then the absolute value of 10 is equal to 10. Or if the whole expression was equal to negative 10, then the absolute value of negative 10 is also 10. After you realize that, you can ignore the absolute value and just focus on the inside. So we know that the 2x minus 4 could equal to minus 10, or the 2x minus 4 could also equal to positive 10. And just solve for x like usual. So on the left side we have 2x is equal to minus 6, therefore x is equal to minus 3. On the right side we have 2x is equal to 14, and therefore x is equal to 7. So therefore our solution is equal to minus 3 and 7. And if you wanted to, you can perform a little self-check on your own to make sure that these two solutions work. I would like you to try one more example on your own, and that should do it for this lesson. I would like you to solve for x in the following absolute value equation. The absolute value of 2x plus 4, but then outside the absolute value I have a minus 6, and all that has to be equal to 10. Now here's a little tip. For this particular equation, even before you can think about the absolute value of 2x plus 4, you have to eliminate that minus 6 on the left side by moving it over to the right side. Remember, this is an equation. All standard equation maneuvers do apply. So go ahead, pause the video, and try it now. Alright, let's see how you guys did. So even before thinking about the 2x plus 4, I'm going to move the minus 6 over to the right. So this will give me absolute value of 2x plus 4 is equal to 10 plus 6, which is 16. And now I can think about the 2x plus 4. So what does 2x plus 4 have to be so that the absolute value of all that gives you 16? Well, it's pretty easy. It would have to be either negative 16 or positive 16. And now let's focus on the 2x plus 4. So we know that 2x plus 4 could equal to minus 16, or the 2x plus 4 could also equal to positive 16. And now just solve for x. So on the left side we have 2x is equal to negative 20. Therefore x could equal to negative 10. And on the right side we have 2x could equal to 12. Therefore x could equal to 6. So therefore our final solution x could either be negative 10 or positive 6. And don't forget, you can always do a self-check to see if these two solutions are correct. And that's all, ladies and gentlemen. That's all there is to how to solve an equation involving absolute value.